For some reason I imagined sheet metal ductwork would be a single video until I realized we took over 6 hours of raw footage over the entire project. This is the first of 2 or maybe even 3 videos for our heating and cooling ductwork, which Elaine and I installed completely on our own. I feel like I'm in an elevator shaft. The system of our house that I've probably spent the most time up late at night thinking about is our HVAC system, our sheet metal duct distribution network for all of the air that's going to be circulating in the house. That's both heating and cooling, but also a whole house dehumidifier and an energy recovery ventilator. We'll cover the last 2 in separate videos, but they will all share the same basic route for the air that's being distributed through the house. And there is a lot of nuances that goes into the design of a system like this. The overall layout is one thing, but then there's the sizing of the ducts, what material they need to be, how many elbows you can have, the airflow requirements needed in the living space to make it comfortable. So this is definitely not a quote DIY friendly job. That's why HVAC contractors exist. And I did actually interview 5 of them. I was going to hire this task out, but I wasn't super impressed with the knowledge of at least 3 out of the 5 of them. And then the other 2 that seemed pretty competent, their prices were very high, which you get what you pay for. So I decided I'm gonna try to tackle this myself, and I basically got the system designed myself. I worked with the design professional to get it designed, so why not install it too? This video will basically walk through the initial rough-in stage of our sheet metal HVAC, how it connects into our air handler, the supply and return trunk, all of the register locations. And the very first step to all this is starting with a good design. Just a brief overview. I might do a whole separate video on this eventually, but I had a design basically in my head for where I wanted the supply and return trunks to be. I'm softening down an area in the garage right up next to the center wall for that. And then I knew all the branches would come up into the joist bays. As far as the actual sizing of the trunks and how they reduce, the sizing of all the branch piping, that was something that is best left to software. So I contracted with a company that I found online called HVAC Web Group or Web Reps. It was only $200 to consult with one of their design professionals. We ran a manual J calculation, which I actually had already done on my own through a software called Cool Calc. It was only a few dollars because I wanted to kind of learn what was going on. But we reran the manual J, and then they did a manual D is what it's called. That is what calculates all of the duct sizing. So with that plan in hand, that really helped in my system layout, and more importantly, the material list to actually get procured. That is a whole nother piece of work in and of itself, figuring out how many elbows, how much tape, how much insulation, just all this random little bits and pieces that make up an HVAC system that if you're not a contractor that does this every day, you got to go out and get that stuff. So I had to figure all that out, and I think I've got most of it on site. I know I don't have all of it, but there hopefully is only going to be 1 or 2 more runs to the supply store. Now that we're through the project, I wanted to give a quick reflection on this design as a lesson learned for the future. When we plan out the ductwork for the future edition, I'm going to work with a slightly higher level of designer that can visit the site and include more detail on the physical duct construction rather than just the theoretical design. For example, the design I received showed a 9-inch return branch going into an 8x8 trunk, which obviously does not work in real life. Not to mention 9 inches round is a non-standard duct size, and the 7-inch going into an 8-inch oval wall stack boot is also non-standard. Of course, I had to modify these to 8-inch branches, and I kept the return trunk at 14x8 all the way to the end. I didn't catch this until well after working through a couple iterations with the designer, so I just made the call to change it without rerunning the calcs, which could increase the static pressure and flow balancing required for the system. This is the sort of thing that happens when you let the software do too much of the thinking, and where an experienced designer who actually visits the site and knows what size material is commonly available would be well worth the extra expense. The remote service was affordable and absolutely better than using rule of thumb methods for ductwork sizing, but in the future I'll definitely spend a little more on this to make assembly easier.
So once I had that design and I had all my register locations marked in my Chief Architect plan. By the way, I used Chief Architect to actually model out where all my floor joists were. In the model, we could see where all the registers were to make sure that we liked aesthetically where they were placed at. This is something that most homeowners or home builders I don't even think about, but I think about it. So I thought it would be good to mock it up ahead of time. Once I had that in the model, I have a pretty good indicator of where all the holes are gonna have to be cut in the floor. So that's where I'm at right now. I'm gonna start marking all the register locations. I have the actual register boots that I need here on hand. So I'm gonna use one to mark the actual rectangles that need to get cut out of the floor. Because once you cut the hole, you really only want to cut it once. You don't want to be plugging holes and redoing stuff. So getting that right the first time is going to be pretty key. So let's grab some register boots and start marking out. I have most of the materials sitting here in the garage collecting dust. They're all going to have to be cleaned off before go to install them, but at least the register boots have been in boxes, so should be able to get away with not having to clean all of those, thankfully. About half the material, I would say, came from this APR supply company. They're a local supply house for us. And then the other half, actually, I got online. You can see only half of it, but this is called American Copper and Brass, acnb.com. They had a lot of good stuff for good prices. So I ordered a lot, like all of my round branch piping came from there. By the way, I'm doing all sheet metal HVAC. I'm not doing any flex duct. I'm not really a big fan of flex duct. No offense to people who use it, but I just think it'll last longer in the long run doing all sheet metal.
Additionally, the pipe interiors are able to be cleaned in the future and air flows with less restriction through the smooth sheet metal.
I believe this is where my register boots. All right. If you're not familiar, that's a register boot. It's actually the first time I've ever held one in my life, so this hopefully goes well. Anyway, this is stamped right on here, 4x10 6. So it's a 4x10 rectangular opening with a 6-inch round duct. This is a pretty common floor register for this house. This is a standard register, an end register. The rectangle would be in line with the round. I have a couple of those too. Here's one, that's for a return. Got a little bit of bend on it. I just wanted to mock these up. I know my sizing. I just wanted to see how close these are to their stated size, like 4x10. Is it actually good if I cut a 4x10 hole? Should be pretty close. Yeah, 4x10 will be good. That'll be a nice snug fit. I just wanted to confirm that, being that I've never cut out for these before. I wasn't quite sure. This is a 14x8 for a return. Or sorry, 14x6 maybe? 12x6. Measuring to the corners is a little bit more accurate. This is more like 6.5, 6 3/8 to the corners. 6-inch might be a bit of a squeeze on that. I'm gonna get started in the living room at this corner of the house. I have a 10x4 here on the plan, and thankfully, when the Amish guys that I hired to come help through the second floor were laying out this subfloor, they graciously put pencil lines on the floor, somewhat to help them have an accurate nail line when they were nailing the sheeting on, but it's stuck all the way till now in the build, and it's really convenient for seeing the joists below me so that I don't accidentally nick one, because hitting those flanges and eye joists are not good. That is not what you're supposed to do. I can very easily, though, make sure that I'm not interfering with the joists, and I also have to keep things in mind, like how we're gonna be using the space. Like this is gonna have a built-in with a fireplace, like a little electric fireplace, ambient space heater thing on it. So I gotta make sure I'm at least 20 or so inches out from the wall to the first edge of this so that we don't come close to that. We also have a couch ending not far from here too, so that is also just something to keep in mind of all the different furniture that might be interfering with these. But I think this joist bay is a pretty solid bet. It's far enough away from the wall to not get in the way of anything, but not so far that it doesn't interfere with the couch. We'll lean towards this side of the joist bay as well. These eye joists are 2 5/16, call it 2.5 wide at the top. So I'm gonna leave a mark centered on this line to make sure that I'm not gonna hit the flange, and stay an inch or so away off that too. I'm gonna come about 8 inches out from the wall here. That seems like a good distance to stay away from any potential future window treatments, or it gives us some room for the base trim, that sort of thing. So 8 inches out from here, and this is a 10x4 oriented this way according to my model. I don't think there's a ton of rules on like exact strict placement or how they should be oriented, other than which way your vent grills throw the air. The orientation we did just because it's right up against the wall, so it would be kind of weird if you put one this way against this wall. I guess we will have a piece of furniture here, so it probably doesn't make a whole lot of difference either way. All kinds of little minute details that can throw you off. So with my square on there square, I'm just gonna mark out the 10-inch by 4-inch and flip the square around and do the same thing. Which way am I flipping this? Oh crap. And there she is. Now to rinse and repeat, I don't know, 15 more times or something like that.
There did turn out to be enough variation in some of these that when it came time to install, I had to open up the hole 1/8 to 1/4 inches in either direction. It wouldn't hurt to give that 1/4 inch of extra clearance in both the long and short dimension from the start.
I got all the supplies marked last night. That was a lot more thought than I thought it was gonna be, just trying to miss floor joists and thinking about where furniture is gonna be, curtains, mocking it up and making sure it looks good and I like the orientation, that I have the right boot for it that I ordered. But I was able to get it all done, and now it's time to do the returns. The system's gonna have 4 returns, 1 in each bedroom and 2 in the hallway. I would have preferred if I could have made them all wall returns, but unfortunately it's just not the way the framing would work out. With floor joists in the way, and I only have 16 inches between floor joists on perpendicular walls, it makes it a little bit more difficult. So in the bedrooms, they're gonna get floor returns. This is the one for this bedroom. This is a 6x14. And then the other bedroom will get a little smaller one, like a 6x12. In the hallways, I'm going to be doing oval stack returns. So these will be in the wall. I'm gonna have this oval boot. This is an 8" by 8" oval to round elbow. This basically takes up the width of the whole 2x4. I'll basically be cutting out the whole 2x4 of the wall. It's fine, it's interior wall. And then I'll have to fabricate essentially a sheet metal box that will sit inside that stud bay and connect to this oval. I'll have a little bit of duct coming up from it, but that's the only way I could figure out how to do it. I didn't find anything on the market that was like a wall stack head boot for this 8" oval with the size return grill that I wanted to get. They probably do exist, but I just couldn't find them in my supply journey. That's something to note too. The amount of learning that I had to do just to even identify what these parts are called and what they mean, where they go, that was itself a whole nother learning journey down the depths of HVACtalk.com, forum posts from 2005 of HVAC guys talking back and forth. There's a lot of really good YouTube channels too that I definitely watched a lot of videos on this sort of thing to do all the upfront learning to actually figure this system out. Again, all the resources are out there, but this is definitely a pretty mentally challenging project, just as much as it will be physically when we actually go to install it. The professional design guy that I worked with, they just give you the computer model of what the duct sizes should be based on the registers and the basic lengths of all the different branches. They don't tell you what an N-boot 90 register looks like, or where to get it, how much it's going to cost, who's got the best price on it. Those are all things that you got to figure out after the fact. I only ran into 2 issues when laying out all the supplies. Luckily, they kind of canceled each other out. Let me show you what I'm talking about. First was in this bathroom. I planned on doing a wall stack here. I didn't think a floor boot in the bathroom was a great idea, being that we're next to a shower, that sort of thing. So I was gonna do a wall stack where it's basically an oval pipe that comes up through the 2x4 and then the vent is on the wall. Well, it just so happens that a joist is running directly beneath this wall. There's no way I could cut through it. So I had to swap this to an N-boot, an N90, just standard 4x10 register. I think it'll be fine. We're still several feet from the shower, and I'm gonna use like a special tile over vent cover to make it look nice. And then coincidentally, in the pantry, I was planning for a floor boot, an N90, a 4x10, just like I had in the bathroom shown. And it turns out that, and I could have done it, right? Here's a joist here. I could have shifted it over a little bit, but didn't see this one coming. That steel column right there. That's got LVL blocking all the way across in that joist space, so there's no way I could have run a pipe through this. Even though it's only a 4" pipe, I probably could have taken a jog through, but I figured I'm gonna have a leftover wall stack boot anyway from the bathroom that I'm not using, so I'm just gonna swap these. It's basically the same exact size. They both had 4" feeder pipes. This is a 5" oval and a 4x10 wall stack head boot. So that'll work out perfectly. As I was laying things out, I was also thinking about whether there was going to be both a supply and return in the same joist bay, because that wouldn't fit. Luckily, I think we'll be able to not do that anywhere here. There's a whole lot of framing geometry considerations when it comes to laying these systems out. So if you're planning one of these installs, just keep that in mind. Marking out this return, here's a little example of some of the things I'm having to think about. The door swings into this room right here. I've sort of sketched that 32" door swing out here. We're thinking about putting a bed here, right? And so the edge of the bed's gonna come like right here. We're probably gonna have a floating nightstand of some sort. We wanna keep the return out from underneath any nightstand, but I don't think that that's gonna be too much of an issue. So I know I've gotta keep the return between here and here. And then as the cherry on top, underneath this wall, and it's actually shifted over a little bit for some reason. It's a double eye joist. That's to stiffen this long span under the garage. There's 4 of them throughout the whole front garage bay. And so I gotta make sure that I do not nick the flanges on those eye joists. So once I figure out my placement side to side, again, this is 6x14, so it's gonna be about this long, about this wide. I'm gonna go from the bottom and drill a small sort of exploration hole within that distance there. I'll measure from, you know, the side of this little subfloor crack to make sure I'm in the right spot. I'm gonna drill that hole right up next to the flange of that eye joist, and that will give me a no doubt indication of how far over I can locate this register so I won't saw in to my eye joist. That's where I settled on. Ended up not having to do the exploration hole. I made it just pretty much centered between the joist bay, so that should balance, you know, as you're walking in, leaving the eyesore a little bit out of sight. We'll have a floating nightstand right here. The bed will be right there, so I think that'll work. I'll use a hole saw to core down so that at least the edges are somewhat rounded, and then finish it off with a jigsaw or something like that. This wall return is a good example where I did have to drill some exploration holes. So this is an 8-inch oval, quote unquote 8. It's actually like 10 3/4 wide. And there's a double joist here. So I knew it was gonna come out wide. And it turns out between the flange of this double and this single, there is like 10 7/8, maybe 11 inches of free play. So there's just barely enough room. It's critical to get this centered just right. So I knew I wanted in this bay, I just do a random hole right down through the middle of it to make sure I knew from below where this wall was centered. And then I went underneath and drilled these 2 holes. And I went just close enough to the joist that I wasn't gonna hit it. And that will give me an indication here from above now where I can mark out and drill for the actual boot to come through or cut through so that I don't hit my eye joist in the process. Now that all the register locations are marked, that was the hard part. I'm gonna pass it off to my little helper here for the easy part, which is actually cutting just around the lines. So we're gonna be using a paddle bit to start, just put like 4 holes in the corners, connect the dots with the jigsaw, and then square off the edges when we're done. All right, well, we went through and I verified all of our register locations with the interior designer. We have one major disapproval, and it's this one right in front of the bedroom door, which I can see. We need to figure something else that's not going to totally screw up our ductwork sizing calculations, which is based on the length of the run and the size of that register. Originally, the plan was to have this in the wall. The problem is there's no good boots that go from an 8-inch round duct to a 3.5x14 wall space. So it would have to be something sort of custom. I don't know what I would do, but this is a 6x14. I would need to have to like somehow mimic the airflow, try to get it in that wall. I don't know. I don't know if it's gonna work or not. After some good long talk and a call to the supply store, we're gonna go back to the original plan of having this return in the wall. This one's gonna be kind of behind the door, which concerned me at first, but then I realized, well, when the door's open, there's like 2 more giant returns in the hallway, so it doesn't really matter that much. When the door's closed, obviously it's gonna work just fine. It'll be totally unobstructed. So we are going to go ahead and drill this. These oval pipes require just a big hole saw on either end and connect the dots with a sawzall. So that's what we're gonna do, an 8-inch round oval. So it'll look kind of like this boot, except instead of this being a sort of right angle this way, it's gonna come this way. So they call them like a cone boot or a reverse. There's a bunch of names for it, but yeah, basically this will be in the wall and then it will come out. Luckily, this wall is right in the middle of a joist bay, so we were able to do that. We're not so lucky on the office wall, and that return is gonna have to stay a floor style return for that reason. What the hell is this? Spider hole saw bits, getting the job done. Would you look at that? Got to square off the corners a little bit. Not a bad looking rectangle.
That officially marks all of the registers that are cut in. I can only take credit for that very last supply and return. Elena did all the rest, so props to her, Miss HVAC installer over here. She's now working on pulling wire. We'll cover that in a different video, but we're doing kind of the electrical and HVAC simultaneously so we can see where the registers are in so we don't block the path of the ducts with wire, but then we're not putting the ducts in yet because it's a real pain to have to work around them when you're trying to staple wire up and pull it and run it and everything else. So it's a little bit of a simultaneous process. I don't know if it's a blessing or a curse that we're doing both electrical and HVAC and insulation. And that's actually important because, especially in this floor platform, we're leaving everything nice and tucked up. Not too far, not up against the subfloor, but we're leaving it tucked up inside that 14-inch deep joist bay so that we can put 6 inches of comfort bat rock wool in the floor platform. That will be a future video. And we're kind of under the gun too because the installation actually gets delivered in like a week. So we got to get all this electrical and HVAC rough and done before this whole garage fills up with insulation, and we need the space. And we got to get everything inspected. So wish us luck.
With the registers cut out, the last major wood to remove was where the ducts will pass through the blocking over top our center garage wall. This blocking doesn't bear any real load, it just keeps the ends of the floor joist stable. The easiest way I found to make these large holes was using a smaller hole saw around the perimeter and then rounding off the points with a sawzall. This allowed the hole to go through the 2x4 blocking as well, which a large hole saw would have struggled with. It's also flexible to do any size hole you need.
With all the prep work done of cutting out our supply and return registers in the floor upstairs and holes through the mid-span blocking to put our ducts through, we can now start actually assembling the ductwork. Just to overview quickly what we already have with this Mr. Cool unit, the 2 to 3 ton universal system is right here. I had this lower box fabricated. If you want to see details on that, you can see it in the universal video. The lower box I had fabricated, this was custom fabricated to adapt from the Mr. Cool size to a 14 by 8. And then these 2 elbows were off the shelf. That's going to take my supply duct up, over, and turn it, and then it's going to come straight this way above our door here. It's a similar story with the return. I just had this fabricated as well. This is a 16 by 16, basically just a piece of duct, but I had a flange put on the bottom of it so that I can cut a hole right into this return box and this will all be connected. Same thing with this reducer, 16 by 16 to an 8 by 16, and then there's a short elbow I have that will connect to that. These will form the basis of our return and supply trunks that will head right down the side wall of this garage. We're gonna soffit around it. We're gonna build a frame around it that the drywall will attach to. But the first thing we gotta do is cut the hole for this thing to attach and get this all one piece so we can get our return trunk up, get those branches up, and get that done. Don't mind the electrical rough-in mess that's going on as well. We're doing electrical and HVAC basically simultaneously, but I wanted to pull all the home runs first. That way this giant duct system is not in the way when it came to stapling all of our cables up. This is what that looks like, and you can see how much of a pain that would have been if the duct was there before the wiring. Wow, it's so nice. This is nice and cool underneath this insulation. Insulation actually works. Look how cold that sheet metal is. I guess that sheet metal is fairly cold too.
It's not cold.
This feels like it was refrigerated though. I was like, is it wet? Doesn't it feel cold?
Have you ever been to one of those parties that's like make clothes out of anything? You have them, right? You have Tetra views?
Yeah, I did one of those. Yeah, I wore like a bed sheet or something. I don't even know what it was.
I never did one of those.
Wow. You must have not had any friends.
I was a loser.
You loser.
I had this box made from 22 gauge metal, which is incredibly thick for ductwork, but I wanted it to be extra strong to support the air handler. Definitely not easy to cut by hand, however.
With that cut in, I'm gonna put the stiffener in. The guys that I had
helped me fabricate this lower box, built the stiffener too. There's one just like it over here on the air handler side to support the heavy air handler. And this is gonna go in just like this underneath to support the return trunk. There's not gonna be a ton of weight on this anyway, but figure I might as well use it because I have it. Yep, that thing is solid as a rock now. It's screwed into both sides and it really stiffened this up big time. Now I'm gonna put together this other 16 by 16 along with the reducer and the right angle while it's still here on the ground because that'll be easiest. Then it'll be all done and sealed up. This is pretty awesome. I feel like I'm in an elevator shaft. Just giving it one last wipe down because we won't be able to clean this anymore after we're done with it without some sort of robot camera. It had a light coating of dust on it. The first thing I'm gonna do is put together the elbow up here. This goes on with regular old slip or S cleats and drive cleats. The slips go on the long dimension of each duct and the drives go on the shorts. The drives are what really holds everything together while the slips sort of stiffen the long end and help align things. But this system works really well. And then once it's all fastened, I'll put a piece of tape around it to seal it from air anyway. They call these drive cleats because as you put them over to the two flanges, you kind of have to drive them on. This one goes on pretty easily, but that's the idea behind the name. Slips and drives. And then these two little tabs, just give a good hammer over. And I'm gonna put a couple fasteners through the S cleat so that it holds everything together really securely. There's no chance of it ever wiggling apart. You can definitely still see that there is light showing through at the corners, and this is the importance of air sealing your ducts. We have mastic here on site we can use, or we do have some mastic tape, SureTape SF686. That's what I'm gonna use here. It'll wrap the perimeter and make sure that this is a good airtight seal. This stuff is insanely sticky, and it is pressure sensitive, so for best adhesion, gotta use the squeegee. Give it that little bit of pressure, and I found it really helps smooth the tape out nicely too. It gives you a good, clean looking professional job when you use the squeegee. Otherwise, use your fingers, it looks something like that. This really helps get all the wrinkles out.
Do you need help?
It actually went in pretty easily. I'm gonna reverse this though. Yeah, if you put this here, yeah, the groove then now is on the inside of the duct. So if it's not quite lining up, you can get yourself a little bit extra play by just flipping that around. Wow, that fits amazingly. These guys are so good. That sheet metal shop. All right, so that's the slips. Now we're gonna drive the drives. We might as well wrap this with insulation too before we put it up.
Is that sharp?
Everything's sharp, it's sheet metal.
I know, should you be wearing gloves?
This insulation is double bubble, two layers of polyethylene bubble. It is R4, and technically the majority of this ductwork is really in conditioned space because we're putting in rock wool underneath our floor platform, so all of our branches will be there. Our trunk lines will have a soft around it that's also going to be insulated with rock wool. So really, it's just this utility. We're still going to insulate all of the ducts with this R4 anyway, just to help with condensation. But in general, it's all basically in conditioned space, including the fact that the garage is conditioned. We have both radiant floor heating and mini splits, which can heat and cool. I feel like the insulation is just practice. I bet we could get away without it and we wouldn't see huge losses, but we're here now, so we might as well insulate it. Here, can you hold this quick while I put some tape on it?
This is the 3M Model 1507 Venture Tape, which is specifically made for joining the seams of reflective polyethylene insulation. It seemed to work pretty well for the most part and blends in perfectly with the double bubble.
Okay, that was the ultimate lesson in gift wrapping. I think we've just about got it covered. I've left this pretty loose up here because another piece of duct's gonna have to come in and then we'll fold and cut all that tight. But this was a little tough because it had the reducer on it plus the radius elbow. But I did the best I could to try to get that kind of flat against there. This stuff is rated for R4 when it's tight up against whatever you're insulating, but it's R8 if you get an air gap. And honestly, I don't know how you couldn't not get an air gap. Like, it's really hard to get this stuff to like stick super tight to anything unless you're legitimately gluing it on there. So I think this will perform fairly well. I'm not too worried about it, to be honest. It's gonna wanna slide with the insulation, so let's pick it up from the bottom.
Oh, where are your gloves? Where are your gloves, boy? I don't really want to stab that.
Okay.
It looks like some type of like costume or something. Like from like Monsters Inc.
Now I'm going to use some mastic tape to seal this off. I ripped a piece in half because it was really too wide for what I needed here. That just gets around the fasteners and everything, so it really will make sure that we're not drawing any return air from places that we don't want to. This turned out really cleanly. I'm happy with that. Now it's time to seal the insulation with insulation tape. You can barely tell that that's even a cut joint though. That's pretty impressive. I like that. It turned out quite well. This is a good looking return plenum. And there she is. That's quite the plenum. We're gonna have to add a little bit of duct right here to increase the height of that supply. And last night I spent some time tidying up our electrical wires. I wanted to do that before we got all of this ductwork in because it would have been a real pain in the butt to do it afterwards. So I think that looks pretty good. We're gonna do a whole nother video on wiring, but give me a thumbs up if it looks like an electrician did it, because that's what I was going for. With the plenum in and all of our ducts clean and organized thanks to Elena, we are ready to put together our very first section of trunk. These just basically snap together, they're two halves, and then we have to put a reducer on, which just looks like this. After our first section of 16 by 8, it will drop to a 14 by 8. So this allows that reduction to happen. You know, I just had a thought. Before we snap this, we might want to cut that one takeoff in it. Just so we don't have to do it with it's all together. Pardon the socks and sandals. I know that's appropriate work gear, but this is my general philosophy for marking out our takeoff locations. So I've got my plenum right there, and then my very first return drop is gonna be that big 8-inch hole right there. So I'm projecting my laser through the center line, and then I'm just gonna measure from the center line to the edge of that. That'll tell me where the center of my first hole's gotta go. I'm gonna cut that on the bench before I assemble it. I had a second thought. I was about to assemble things and thought this might be easier if I just cut this ahead of time, and I think it will be. So I'll measure that. I'm gonna use my hole cutter to cut the circle out. This is actually a supply, so we don't have to worry about that for now. But let's see how this goes. Then we'll assemble it, and we should be good to go. I have to do one more too. It's over on this, in this joist bay, so I'll mark that out at the same time. Here's how I'm cutting these circles in the duct. This is a Klein tool circle cutter. It uses a cordless drill as the cutting power. First you drill the center hole with the bit where you want it. Then it has a little peg that sticks in there, and it just slowly rotates around and drills out the hole. Looks really good when it's done, except for my very first one, which got a little bit wonky because I failed to tighten the thing with a wrench. So my 6-inch starting hole became like a 7-inch for the first few inches until I noticed. So luckily my adhesive takeoffs, I have a very wide flange and it'll cover all that. But life lesson learned the hard way. Well, we're going into the night here, and we have it's about 2/3, I would say, of the return trunk complete. We're really just figuring out what the heck we're doing, so I skipped most of the filming, but we have the first section that I was working on with the 8-inch and 6-inch takeoff, and then there's a reducer in here, and then it goes to as a 14x8 over to here, and then there's actually 2 6-inch holes we still need to cut out of, we've already made the hole in the sheet metal, but our ERV will integrate into this return trunk, and that's what that's for. And then there's one more little short piece that's got to go on the end, where 2 8-inch actual returns are going to go into that. We have a professional insulator working on our insulation job. Oh my gosh, it's late. It's like 11:30 at night.
Do I look tired?
Inspection's in 2 days. There's no way we're getting this done in 2 days. But hopefully the inspector gives us some grace.
Perfect.
All right, this is gonna be an interesting setup. Roller stand on box on scaffold. Let's do it.
It was not easy getting this rigid ductwork connected up to that elbow. A flexible canvas connector would have made the connection a lot easier, but I could only find it in 300-foot-long rolls at $400 a rolls. So I skipped it for the return, but I got creative and found a piece for their supply. More on that in the next video.
It's 12:24 in the morning, and by some Christmas miracle, we got our return trunk hung. This is amazing. It looks really good, and it is dead level. I'm so impressed with us. I'm even more impressed with this Harbor Freight roller stand, which is the real MVP for getting this thing going. It was pretty tough to get those slides to line up at the same time. That was a real pain, but we finally got through that. I had to open the slides up just a little bit, but we're all in there. I made some hangers out of drive material. They're basically straps. I'm putting them every 4 foot. And yeah, I'm pretty stoked with how this looks. This is great. And check that out. We are almost just dead level. That's gonna be awesome. Heading down, I still need to put one more support. And we are short on 2 takeoffs. That's what these holes are for. That's for our ERVs. So I just slit the insulation so I could easily slide the takeoff up underneath, screw that in, and then we're gonna elbow over to come back to the ERV. We'll do a whole separate video on that to explain how that all works.
We did pass our rough electrical inspection in order to proceed with getting some of the insulation in the walls and ceiling, but we didn't even come close to finishing the ductwork. So we put it on hold for a bit to focus on receiving insulation and wrapping up exterior finishes. In the next part of the ductwork saga, we'll finish up the return trunk and branches and move on to the supply side. As always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.